So let's start talking a little bit about how Redshift, well, like how lighting and shading works inside of Redshift. So let's first, if you've ever seen the NVIDIA ray tracing demos with the RTX cards, you've probably seen this picture come up a couple of times. Let's see if I can maximize it. So with RTX on, RTX off, so we're going to build this sort of environment to sort of demo some of the basics for just lighting and shading inside of Houdini. So yeah, let's do that. So let's make a empty geometry node. Let's make a box. Let's blast away one side of our box. And let's move to the side and let's make a camera. We haven't really done that. Well, I showed quickly how it works, but we haven't done a lot with it yet. So if you go to the view here, you can go to no cam and then click new camera. What it will do is we'll create a camera from view. So you can see it happen. Or you can go into the lights tab here and then control click on camera and we'll also create a camera. So if you go onto this camera, in the view tab, we can set the resolution. And this box is, well, it's a box. So let's make it a square resolution. Let's make it 1024 by 1024. So the camera will have all of your settings. So because I'm using Redshift, I have this Redshift tab here. And if you don't have those parameters, you can select your camera and then click Add Object Parameters. If you're using an under render engine like RenderMan, you could go to the RenderMan tab and then add spare parameters, and then it would add RenderMan spare parameters. So these will be the parameters that are specific to this render engine. So we have this box. Let's make this camera just straight in front of it. So 0, 0, 0. So straight in front of it. And if you have the lock enabled, that will mean that if you move the view, that the camera will be locked with it. If you don't do that, turn it off. You see the camera will stay in place and you can just move around it. All right. So if you're going to use Redshift, you can click the plus icon. You can make the Redshift render view. So if I click the plus icon here, or I could maybe do it a little bit different. If I do it here on the bottom, you can see I already did a previous recording. So let's close that. If I go over here, click the plus icon, go to new pane tab. With this, you can change the user interface to add other viewers. So I can put it to a Redshift render view. Let's just press render. And if I press render, you see in the out view, what it did is it created a Redshift ROP. So if you go over here, you can see all the views. In out, it's created a Redshift ROP. So ROP stands for rendering operators. So that's where you set all of your settings basically for your rendering. And by default, it's set to render from camera 1. If I were to make another camera, let's say I make another camera here. And I put this now to camera 2. If I now press render, you can see it renders from that thing. So you can see it looks a little bit weird. That's because you need to have proper normals on your objects with Redshift to see stuff like angular shapes. So let's put a normal. So vertex normals, and then I now render. You can see it looks straight. It looks weird because it doesn't have a material applied. So let's do it from our proper camera. Let's do camera 1. So I'm just refreshing the scene there. So, and so we kind of want to apply a material. So materials, you create them in the drop-down menu here, and you go to material view. And here's where you make all your materials. So with Redshift, I generally use a RS material builder. So that's a material builder here. And that's a subnetwork and if you go into the subnetwork, you only have Redshift nodes. Because if you go out here, you also have Mantra nodes and RenderMan nodes, depending on which render engine you work in. So I generally like to do it like this. So let's just call it, I guess, test material, something like that. So in here, there's just a VOP. So again, like all of the other contexts, shading is also just done with VOPs, but these will be Redshift specific VOPs. So if I type tab, you can can see there's materials here, and I can add a redshift material. So let's add it to the surface like that. Now, there's multiple ways to apply materials. So you can apply it on the entire object. If I go select my object and go to the render tab, and I can drag my material on there. Now it's applied it to the whole thing. So if I just refresh, now it's still super white. So let's make it a color. So now it's red. You can see it's not really, well, looking that great. Oh, I need to, by the way, I need to put my color management for now to Rec 709. I'll go more into that later. So right now it looks a little bit, weird because we don't have any lights. We don't have anything else there. Let's just create a sphere in the center maybe. Or let's see what the NVIDIA thing does. Yeah, they have spheres. So let's make a sphere. Put it on the bottom. Let's go out here. Copy and paste this. Maybe this subnetwork. Call it maybe sphere. And by the way, on this thing here, maybe set a preset for this material. So on the red material, maybe let's put it to plastic. Make it a white plastic. And on our sphere, let's make it, this is a metal material. There's a couple of presets here, they're not that great, but they're a good starting point. So let's make it aluminum maybe. Let's reload. Oh, we need to apply it to our thing yet. So let's apply this to our material. I kind of have the feeling that we're not. Okay, so maybe we should just add a light because we cannot really see what we're doing here. So let's add the top light because what we have here, you see there's a top light. All right, so what we can do is if we type redshift light, so you can either do that or you can go to the redshift tab and then control click on the light or just click on the light and then you can put it somewhere in the viewport. I'm just going to type redshift light. I'm going to put it down. It's going to be super bright and the positioning is also not correct. So let's put it where we want it to. So let's rotate it. So -90, 0, and 0. Let's move it up. And this is an area light, meaning that it has a surface. You can also have different types of lights. You can also have a point light. Like if I make this a point light, let's make it a point light and let's put down the intensity. So let's put it to 1. Right, so now you can sort of see more what's going on. So a point light will just be infinitely small. So you can see also there's the shadow is like super hard. It's because it's coming from an infinitely small point, like the sun. Like the sun generally also has like pretty hard shadows, right? But kind of what we want to do is we want to make an area light and make it maybe like a little bit smaller. So let's make it maybe 0.2 by 0.2 by 0.2. Now it's super dark because we need to give it more intensity. So maybe crank it back up to 100. All right. So this is now our little area light thing there on top. And you can see the sphere here has this this aluminum material. So let's add some of the other things. So there's 2 more spheres there. So let's look into our cam. And if we turn off headlight only, then we can get back to this view because the viewport generally doesn't look that great with like redshift lights. So let's make another redshift light. Oh, sorry, let's not make another redshift light. We need to copy and paste our sphere. So let's go over sphere. Call this, I guess, aluminum. Copy and paste it. No, don't want to go inside. Let's maybe make this one called diffuse. I'm gonna explain a little bit more about what that is later. Let's move it. I'm gonna turn off my rendering for now because it just slows everything down a little bit. All right, so let's put the aluminum sphere over there. Let's put the diffuse sphere. Let's put it over here. Make it a little bit smaller. put it on the ground, and then make another one, copy and paste it. This is going to be the glass one. It's going to be that one. Oh, selecting the wrong one. Put it over there. Okay, let's call this one glass. Okay, so let's transform it down a little bit. Okay, so let's assign these different materials. So we have this, we call this aluminum, I guess. Let's copy and paste this and make this one diffuse. I'm going to go more into what all this stuff is later, but and call this one glass. Right? So let's already assign them. So let's go in here, go to render tab, assign diffuse material, go into glass material and assign the glass material. All right. So now let's go in here and let's just assign some presets. So put this to glass. I'm going to go over these settings later and put this one to plastic, and let's make it, what color do we want it? There, they're using green there. I guess let's make it green. Team green, I guess. All right, let's press render. Okay, I'm going to move this one over to the side a little bit. All right, so basic thing is here. So there's a couple of things. Let's go into our class. Let's have a look. So for some reason, the reflection weight is set super high. Let's put it to 1. Let's turn off this thing. All right, so now it's gonna be, so if you turn on bucket rendering, it's gonna render with buckets. All right, so now let's, now first let's also assign these colors maybe to the sides. So we haven't done that yet, but another way to assign stuff is, let's first make these materials maybe. Let's see which colors do we need. We need red and green, and the rest is white. Box red, box green, box white. Okay, so let's go into our box. Let's give it a name, box. So in here we have these groups. So we can select a side maybe. No, I don't want to edit it. Let's select this side, type group. Now let's group it, call it red. Now select this other side, group, call it green. And now we can assign materials. So let's first assign the white material. So if we just put the white in here, it will assign this white material to this entire box. Now let's make another material. So second, now let's put it to green and then assign green material in there. And the green material needs to be green, of course. And the red material needs to be red. So go in there, red, and put it on being, oh, I put it in the wrong one. This needs to be white, needs to be red, and red. You can also make, by the way, these materials that you have here, you can also not do them inside of a material builder and just put them like this. Then they also have sort of a preview in the viewport. So we could also try that if you wanted to. All right, so if I press render, you can see this works. In the viewport, it doesn't do these colors. That's because these subnetworks don't automatically do this viewport color. If you make a Redshift material in here, so if let's say I make one over here, I make it red. If I put this one in red, you see that also still works, but now I do get some viewport stuff. So let's put it to red, call it red. call this one, make this one green. So that also works. But generally, just material building itself is easier like this. There's ways that you can make this stuff also properly visible on here, but just so you know, just for the basics, this is fine. All right, so we have this thing. Let's turn down the intensity. So something like this. So it's, I guess, somewhat similar to what we have there. All right. So now to the ray tracing thing. So of course, what this now does is it just has a light shooting down, but there's no bounces at all. So if you want to have a more of a very simply explained thing of how stuff like this works, like what path tracing is and what ray tracing is, I suggest checking out this video, Disney's Practical Guide to Path Tracing, which is explained in a way that like even little kids can understand it. It's aimed at like people with no knowledge of CG or whatsoever. So look up Disney's Practical Guide to Path Tracing. It's just a very basic overview of like how does something like this work. So Redshift itself uses some tricks to do the same thing, but this is an interesting watch. I recommend you also watch this. So in order to do these bounces, we need to go onto our ROP. So there's the ROP here. We can go to Redshift, then to Global Illumination tab, and then here we have primary GI and a secondary GI engine. So in general, you just use primary GI brute force, secondary GI irradiance point cloud. Brute force will just brute force all of the rays, and irradiance point cloud will sort of make splodges and then like sort of blur those out and do like a sort of an, I guess, into like a it's just an easier fix to be able to do stuff like that. If you want to know more on details for stuff like that, I recommend checking out Saul Espinosa. He has a lot of Redshift stuff, and he has a lot of very long videos going into all of the settings for Redshift. It's a lot of these things are for Maya as well, but it doesn't matter for the settings. It doesn't really matter what you're looking at. But if you want to know like more details on stuff like that, I recommend checking out his stuff, because like in this video now I'm just going to go over the basics, and then of course in the more in the part where we're going to do the scene assembly of the whole scene, then we're going to go more into depth as well, but I'm not going to talk over every single one of the settings. So if you want to know more about that, you can go over there, or you can go to the Redshift homepage. There's also video tutorials there. So there's one from Mo from Entagma. He has one for Houdini, I think, here, and he's going to go into the sampling. So I'm also going to talk a little bit about sampling in a little bit. So you could also check out this one. But yeah, so anyway, as you can see, we already have now you can see we have this, well, this more sort of bounce lighty stuff. You can see our sides are way too reflective. So let's maybe change some parameters on our materials. So the thing with so if we go into materials, because these side materials, we don't really need all this reflection, right? I mean, they're basically completely diffuse. So if you select your material, you have diffuse, reflection, and refraction. And those do basically, well, what they say they do. So let me maybe make this smaller. So let's just enable this. So if on the reflection, if I turn off the reflection on the green, you can see now it will be diffuse. Let's also do it on the red. Now it will also be diffuse. I could also keep the reflection on, but then make it super rough. So you can see now it will be a sort of a more rough reflection. But in this case, we probably just want it to be like that. And then also on the white, maybe we want to do another one for the white because we still had that from the subnet. Let's do one on here, and let's maybe assign that as well there. Let's go into the box. Let's assign white, call this white. And let's turn down, oh, so yeah, it already has the reflection turned on. All right, now it's completely diffuse. So it's looking pretty good already. So we could change maybe some stuff on our things already. So if we go on our out, so there's a couple of things here. You can see there's the GI bounces. So if I turn this to 0, reload, and let's make a screenshot. So you do that over here, click the plus icon. Let's put it to 1. And if I do this, get the bucket rendering, then it's going to do the actual thing. So it's going to render like that. Let's render another one. Now let's make one super high, like 12. So this will determine how many times the light will bounce. So let's click plus. So this is 0 bounces, 1, 12. You can see there's a really big difference in the way that the scene looks because of how the light bounces around. So about brute force and ratings point cloud, like ignore that for now. Again, look at Saul Espinosa stuff to go more into depth. We'll also start tweaking these parameters when we're going to do the final scene, but for now, just use this. Because this is just what you use 90% of the time when using Redshift. And I'm going to put it to 3 bounces now. That should be fine. All right. Looking good. So you might have noticed that the sphere here is like not really smooth. It is a little bit angular. Now you might think, oh, but we can go into our sphere maybe and then put down like a subdivide here. Well, you could do that and it would work, but there's also something called render time subdivisions. So let's do that. So that will add render time subdivide our mesh. So if you go to the Redshift object parameters here, go to tessellation and enable tessellation. Let's refresh. So this will, you can see now it's smooth. It will, because it will subdivide it at render time. Let's also do it to the other ones. So now they're all smooth. If I were to do this on the box, however, and we get this. So what it now kind of does is it subdivides it, but if you subdivide a regular box like that, what it basically does is it's going to do this. Just put a subdivide manually. It's going to do this. Oh, that's not really what we want. What we can also say is just don't want to do smooth subdivisions. Let's just have it be, so keep the angles. So now it looks fine. Again, you don't necessarily necessarily want to subdivide this box. Just putting it out there that's how you would do it. You do see it does make it a little bit of a difference. Let's say so with this thing you can do the render region. You can put it here and anything. Like if I enable, let's make a screenshot. Let's enable tessellation. So you can see there's some more stuff going on there, bouncy stuff in the corners. But again, generally, you would also want to take into account the stuff that you're just doing. Right. So very basic how that whole thing here worked. So yeah, so before we start talking more about materials, let's first just do couple of more settings on this Rob. So you see there's noise. If we zoom in, there's a whole bunch of noise. So over here on the settings, so Redshift settings, there's sampling parameters. So if you crank up these samples, there will be less noise. However, that's not really the way you kind of want to do it. So let's just first try it. Let's just put 256 samples. And it's going to be slower to render. And now there's less noise. Probably also need to do some other stuff. But this is generally not what you do. This is basically brute forcing samples to get rid of noise. What you generally want to do, and there's a lot more detail on that on this one from Bayamoid. You generally want to change samples on the specific things that have a lot of noise. So that's what some people also don't really understand when just coming to Redshift. I've had some discussions with some people on this, but generally you don't want to crank up these samples. That will just make it slow. This will be like a multiplier on all of the other stuff. You generally want to change your samples for specific things. So let me explain on this a little bit more. Let's make some AOVs. So in Redshift 3, I'm not sure if it's also on the latest 2.6 build, but if you type AOV here, you get Redshift AOVs. Let's put it down. On the other ones, you just go to Redshift output and you have an AOV tab over here. And you can make AOVs over here. So I'm just going to do it with this thing for now. So AOVs are so this is my beauty render, and this has all the information integrated. But with AOVs, you can sort of split this up. So because this has several different elements, it has diffuse, like I already explained before. It has reflections, that's refraction. So we can split these up. So let's make more AOVs. Let's make a diffuse AOV. Let's make reflection, refraction. So let's just put a whole bunch. Let's whatever. Let's put 8 for now, and let's see how many we need. So diffuse, reflections, specular lighting. Go to roughness. Where is it? Sorry, not refraction. Sorry, refractions. Global illumination. Generally, also, if you have subsurface scattering, you would add subsurface scattering. We don't have that right now. Let's just remove this for now. You can use all of these AOVs later in compositing as well. We're going to do that in the more in the extended course. But let's press render. Oh, we need to put this AOVs thing inside of our AOVs config, by the way. Let's put it in there and have this render. All right. You see now we have a drop down here. So we can go to diffuse. This looks great. Nothing's wrong. Reflection, a little bit of noise, not so bad. Specular, it's fine. This looks pretty noisy. Refraction looks pretty noisy. GI looks super noisy. Okay, so what could we do? We could override these samples. So we go to Redshift, sampling overrides. So what do we need to override? We need to override the, what was it? We had the refraction needs to be override. Okay, so let's go into refraction. Let's override this with 256 samples. So now the refraction will be sampled 256 times. And then this will be the multiplier for this thing. So, and let's go. And I think a lot of the noise also comes from a GI. So if you go to global illumination, you have brute force GI rays. Let's crank this up to 512 or something. And let's have a look at our beauty. Let's render. So yeah, this is looking a lot better. If we now go into our GI, yeah, that's looking great. So that's generally how you sort of work with Redshift, change your samples and stuff. The samples here is mostly if you have a lot of depth of field, if you have a lot of motion blur, you use this to clean that up. So that's just the basics on this part. Now let's maybe dive more into some other stuff and just like how we can make some more interesting materials. And also maybe do some more with some lights and stuff. So at first just change maybe a couple of more stuff on the lights before we go to the next video. Let's hide all the stuff that we have now. Let's hide the box. Let's maybe just make a grid. I'm just going to show some more lights. So hide this. We can keep these things. Let's make a grid. Let's put it down. Let's make our second camera. Put the redshift drop to go over the camera number 2. And there's also IPR as a separate custom IPR cam if you want to use that. So I'm going to move the thing over here. Let's press render. So now we don't really necessarily also need a lot of GI samples anymore. Oh, and I could say this is my box drop. I could also copy and paste this and call this my light drop. And then I could over here say that I want this now to run over my light drop. So, and then let's turn this down to 16 again. And I'm going to turn off this light that we have and let's make a new light. Let's make type redshift light. Let's just show a couple of lights. Right, so this is an area light like we showed before. Let's turn down the intensity. You can see now the shadow is quite soft. Again, if you make this super small, I'm kind of messing that up, 0.1, 0.1, and increase the intensity. You see the shadows will be harder. Again, there's also point lights. There's distant light, will be kind of like a sun would be a distant light. So that would mean it's like infinitely far away and just coming from that general direction. So you can see that will be that's what the sun would do. You also have a specific redshift sunlight. So if I do redshift light sun, so you see that has some sun type parameters built in. Let's turn down the intensity. You again just play around with more stuff like this. So there's a whole bunch of stuff we're gonna get into later when we start doing the scene assembly. But there's also redshift light dome, and that will put a big sphere all across your scene, which will emit light from every side. You could put an HDRI in that. So an HDRI will be a high dynamic range image. So let's put one in. You can get one from hdrihaven.com. He has a lot of free HDRIs. You can support him on Patreon as well. But let me just put one in. So just on the light and then dome map. And I need to put this to Rec 709 for this to work, because I'm gonna get more to OpenColor IO later, but not for now. So now you can see we get super realistic lights from the get-go from this HDRI. So very nice. So again, if you want to know more, we're gonna get more into using lights and stuff in the extended part where we're going to talk more about the scene assembly and stuff. But just for now, for the basics, that's how this works.